Hello, PRST 4600. My name is Ebony Price, and this is my related research article number 2. I chose the topic of linear regression. The article I chose is called Bilingual Vocabulary Assessment, examining single language, conceptual, and total scoring approaches. This article is by Lisa Fenton, J. Mark Goodrich, Lauren Thayer, Amy Pratt, and Rose Luna. Below you will see my APA citation and the link for my article. So they actually used 115 kindergartners and first graders for this study. So it was a multi-sited study. So the University of South Carolina partnered with the University of Nebraska Lincoln, and they took some kindergartners and first graders from each. There's not really talk of how they chose these students other than they looked at students who were bilingual and spoke Spanish at home and were exposed to both Spanish and English at home and school. So they wanted to make sure that it wasn't just like just English learner students. They actually wanted true bilingual students in this study. A majority of the students actually came from South Carolina. They say about 66% versus 33% coming from Nebraska. They also say that there were more kindergartners, roughly about 73% versus 27% of first graders, and the average student age was around 6 years old. So they had a pretty good sample. I felt like this study was set up really well. Um, the tests they use, you can see on these tables. They use 2 tests. They use the EOW PVT-4 SBE and the BESA sentence repetition. So both of these tests actually have pretty good internal consistency, reliability. The EOW test being was at a 0.95, and the BESA for Spanish was at a 0.96, and English at a 0.95. They did do these tests by language. So they actually done the EOW test and used it in 2 ways. They used it to help choose the student's prospective language. So they kind of looked at some drawings or actions and asked the student to name them. And um, so whatever the student said, they took and quantified that, and then used the language that they used most to actually administer the rest of the test for this study. Um, So they then use the EOW PVT4 test. They gave it in Spanish only and English only on separate days. And then they done the BESA test the same way. So this snapshot that you see here is one of the linear regression models from the article. This depicts the children's raw score vocabulary test scores in relation to their relative language. Like I said at the beginning, the EOW PVT4 test was used to determine that primary language for the student. So I like to keep that in mind when I'm looking at um, these scatter plots. So if you look at figure 1A, you see that there's a positive linear association between Spanish only and it's trending upward toward that primary language is trending in that higher, pulling that line of regression upward. And I think it's because most of the students in the study, their language at home was Spanish. So they're getting more exposure to the Spanish. So I feel like that probably assisted with that positive association. As you can see, there is some negative association going on at the bottom with the English only test. That you can see the Spanish at the bottom is really pulling that line of regression down. And I also feel like that attributes to have they speak Spanish at home, and even though they are in English only programs at school and they're exposed to English at home and at school, I think they get a little more of that Spanish language exposure, and I think that definitely shows here within these scatter plots. If you look up at C, um, this is what they considered a quadratic trend because the it starts like it's going to be a negative linear association, and then the Spanish actually pulls that that line of regression back up into the quadrant across from the first quadrant. So that's what they consider a quadratic trend, and that's how they explained how that worked. If you look at D, there's no real association. The on the scatter plot, the dots on the scatter plot kind of start to level themselves out. And I think that is because overall the students had good vocabulary in relation to both languages. So as you can see here in figure 2, this these set of scatter plots are for the students' standardized vocabulary scores uh, um, in comparison to their relative language, and also for their sentence repetition scores. So as you can see, they're actually quite similar to the last set. There's some positive linear association in in E. You can see some negative in F, and then that quadratic trend pops up again in both G and H. Um, if you look at H, though, you can see there's like less of less of an association. I wanted to end here with the actual regression analyses table that shows their linear regression across all of their tests. They did have some missing data because this, when they were collecting their data and doing their testing, COVID hit and they had to abruptly stop their testing. They done some post hoc analyses to try and pull that data back together. And overall, I felt like they done a really good job. I would actually love to see this study duplicated again, possibly with a larger sample study of students, or maybe tracking them across maybe into other grades and seeing how those students done as they got older. So I thought this was just a super interesting study. I really enjoyed seeing the linear regression models. They looked really great. Um, I will say that they mentioned the histograms for the linear regression analyses a few times, and I was kind of bummed out that within the article itself, they didn't have pictures of the histograms from this study at all. There is a place within the study that says that you can request those type of um, extra materials that they have, but for the sake of time, I didn't have time to reach out and try and see those. But I thought this was super interesting, and I hope you did too. And I hope you learned a little more about linear regression. Thanks, guys.